recorded the following video while I was teaching a school online, so the angle may be a bit weird at times. Hi, I'm Hermana with Promised Land Stories, and today we want to take a closer look to the context in which the Lord introduced His holy name to the people of Israel. Moses asks to see God's glory. And the Lord says to him, no person can see him and remain alive. So he hides him in the shadow of his hand, and then he begins to reveal himself. Exodus 34 verse 5 and 6. Then the Lord came down in the cloud and stood there with him and proclaimed his name, the Lord. And he passed in front of Moses proclaiming, the Lord, that in Hebrew would be Yahweh, Yahweh, the compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger and abounding in love and faithfulness. Moses had had a crash course in seeing this God of Israel at work during the Exodus from Egypt. And it actually started when he was a little child in the house of the daughter of Pharaoh, where he grew up. He saw firsthand how much authority this Egyptian king had, how much weight his words carried, and how large he was in his own eyes. The name Yahweh appears about 7,000 times in the Bible. Thus we see it's very important. What does the Lord mean? It means He is the chief authority. You may say King or Lord, but it means the person whom you submit to, the one who makes the laws, the one you obey. And we see that this concept of God was formed in the presence of a cruel man. The Pharaoh was threatening, and as I said, he was very big in his own eyes. So the Lord teaches the people of Israel the fear of the Lord versus the fear of man. From Exodus forward, the Bible writers, the Psalms, the Kings, the prophets, even the New Testament often speaks of the Lord saving Israel with His strong hand and His mighty arm. This image of the arm is one who helps, who extends to draw them out, to carry them, to protect them, to instruct them, to feed them. But contrary to that, there's also the image of a burning fire. And that is the one that judges Israel's enemies. Moses and the Israelites get to know Yahweh in the crucible of Egypt, in a culture that has everything to do with arms and with a consuming fire. For years, God had prepared this situation in which He was going to redeem Joseph's family through Joseph's positioning. There's a lot of favor on Joseph, and now there's favor on these brothers. If you think of the Nile as a long arm, and then the hand of the Nile being the delta, okay, the Goshen area. So there's a lot of water there, and things grow very easily. So it's as if God is placing Israel in almost a lap of luxury. They are living in the palm of His hand here in Goshen. But a much later Pharaoh sees them as a tremendous threat. So he begins to kill the baby boys, throw them into the Nile, and among those baby boys is one called Moses. And at the time that Exodus 1 happens and the people start crying out to God, this Moses is already a young guy. Remember the story, he was saved by the Pharaoh's daughter. He grows up in the house, the same kind of setting that Joseph had, learning the skills, the language, the administration, the culture. And he hears the Lord speaking to him in a burning bush, and then God calls him to come and be a deliverer. Exodus 6 verse 1. Then the Lord said to Moses, now you will see what I will do to Pharaoh. Because of my mighty hand, he will let them go. Because of my mighty hand, he will drive them out of this country. God also said to Moses, I am the Lord. I appeared to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob as God Almighty. But by my name, Lord, I did not make myself known to them. Now, all of the Bible characters, each one of them had a specific way in which God revealed himself to them. For example, Adam as a creator, and he invites Adam into the creation process. He gives names to the animals. He himself makes the first human beings. So he's a co-creator. We look at Noah. Noah encounters him first as the righteous judge, and he tells him, I'm going to finish off with this wickedness. I want you to build a boat. Abraham, I am the Most High God. His name is El Elyon. Okay, we find that in Genesis 14 when he engages Melchizedek. Then the next one is El Shaddai. That's the one that appears in this passage. Shaddai comes from Almighty in Hebrew. Then the next one is El Olam, the God of the universe. And that also appears in Genesis 14, where God basically says, I'm the possessor of heaven and earth. Look at the stars. I'm the God of the universe. Look at the country. I can give it to you. It's mine to give. David calls God by personal pronouns, my shepherd, my rock, my shelter, my stronghold. So everything's personalized. We think of Isaiah, holy, Holy One of Israel. You see, Isaiah had such bright spiritual eyes that he was able to see into the past and into the future. And he sees the gods of Egypt. And he sees the gods of Mesopotamia and the Nabatean gods and the Edomite gods and the Moabite gods. He sees into the future the Greek gods and the Roman gods. And he's appalled by them. And when he uses the term Holy One of Israel, he's basically saying that the God of Israel is outside of all of this experience. He's not like the gods that have sexual exploits with one another's wives, the ones that are angry with others, that fights. And then Daniel calls God the Ancient of Days. Okay, he sees him seated on a throne, white hair, and Daniel serves in the presence of 4 kings. He sees this one that has continued authority even over kings, and he sets them up and he takes them down. So we then finally come to Moses. By the name Lord, I have not made myself known to them. Lord is Yahweh in Hebrew. Now, in the first letter of that word Yahweh is Yud. And think of an arm. The Pharaoh had a very powerful arm. This length from the elbow tip to the middle finger was the measurement of a cubit. And they had the first ruler that is today even visible in the Egyptian museum. That ruler, which you draw a straight line with, and that's a measuring stick, that came from the Egyptian context because it was also meaning the ruler, the one that has the authority. For example, those days there was not a law yet, a code of law. He could basically say, you died today, and the servants come and it's finished with you. Your life is ended, because the Pharaoh's word was a law unto itself. And the Hebrew children are observing this. They are seeing that here's a person, a human, with so much authority that when he speaks something, you either live or you die. So God is building into their minds an understanding of the King of all kings, the Lord of all lords. The pyramids. The word pyramid comes from 2 words, pyramid. Pyre is the forerunner for the word fire. So Amid means household. That's how the ancient Egyptians, that was their worldview. They basically saw the sun at the top. They put the top of the pyramid in gold. Chief god of the whole pantheon of the Egyptians. His name was Ra. It's the sun disk with rays, and at the end of every ray is a hand. That was their way to say that the rest of the pantheon, they were the helpers. They were the staff, if I can pull it that way. So a principal can't get to all the classes, so he has a staff that extends his hands to the rest. So when we look in the book Deuteronomy, we see that there is a lot of reference to fire. I'm just going to read a few of that to you. And this was the setting in which God formed the Hebrew understanding of who He is. Deuteronomy 4, verse 10. Remember the day you stood before the Lord your God, Yahweh your God, at Horeb, and when He said, assemble the people before me to hear my words so that they may learn to revere me. Those words, revere me, means to fear me, to have a trembling for who I am. Verse 11, you came near to the mountain and stood at the foot of it while it blazed with fire to the very heavens, with black clouds and deep darkness, when the Lord spoke to you out of the fire. You see why I wanted to have this thing, it looks like fire today? Jump with me to the next verses. Verse 15, you saw no form, the Lord your God spoke to you at Horeb out of the fire. Verse 24, still chapter 4. The Lord your God is a consuming fire, a jealous God. If the person that you see as your chief authority is not an approachable individual, this is very scary. But here's the reason why it is so important to have the fear of the Lord. Malachi 3, verse 16. I'm going to read up to verse 18. Then those who feared the Lord, that's Yahweh, talked with each other, and the Lord listened and heard. A scroll of remembrance was written in His presence concerning those who feared the Lord and honored His name. They will be mine. Who? These people that fear me, says the Lord Almighty, in the day when I make up my treasured possession. I will spare them, just as in compassion a man spares his son who serves him. And you will again see the distinction between the righteous and the wicked, between those who serve God and those who do not. Again, see the distinction. Now tell me, which other time did God make a distinction? At the time of Noah, some people went down in the flood and others were preserved. And during the time of the plagues, it says here in Exodus 11, verse 7, the second part, the last part, it says, then you will know that the Lord makes a distinction between Egypt and Israel, because it will be dark with the one and light with the others. Some of the animals will die, some of the animals will live. Hail will fall on some crops, the others will have no hail. We are seeing plagues coming to the earth, and there will be more things happening that has to do with a cosmic showdown of who is the final authority. And God is doing it in His love. Yes, He has to deal with wickedness and sin in the earth, giving people an opportunity to see how does righteousness look and how does wickedness look, and to make up their mind. There will again come a time when the reason that you will live or die will be only one thing, and that is whether you fear the Lord or not. To summarize, I'd like to think of the name Yahweh as a huge diamond, that as it turns, it flashes rainbow colors, and each one of these facets is another name of God. El Elyon, El Shaddai, El Olam, Yahweh Rophe, the healer, Tzvaot, God of armies, Roi, shepherd. But on the top, we could say that the name Yahweh is written. Yud Hey Vav Hey. Yud is the same as the Hebrew word Yad, which means arm, which is an image of God extending His hand to help His people. But the same rainbow flashes that communicate hope and security and salvation to God's people has the threat of death for God's enemies, those who are wicked and those who are rebellious. For the God of Israel, the Lord, is a consuming fire.